Well, for those of you that were not here last Sunday, I'm presuming probably all of you were, but just in case. Jesus goes for the first time after his baptism and his tempting in the wilderness, his coming to terms with what his ministry was going to really look like, and he comes home. There's no place like home, right? Hard to go home. He goes home and he enters the synagogue in his little village of Nazareth, and as was the custom, most Jewish men, by the time they were 13 or 14, would have been taught to read, especially from the Torah. They would have read the 5 books of the law every year. So there's a long reading. If you go to an Orthodox Jewish synagogue, you will hear reading that will take approximately an hour, because they read the entire 5 books from Genesis through Deuteronomy every year. 52 Saturdays, takes a good bit of reading to get through that. But on occasions they would read from the prophets as well. This particular occasion we hear that Jesus, as a guest, as a male, would be invited up. It'd be an honor. And he would be given the text, a scroll, which he would unroll. Now he's reading from the 61st chapter of the book of Isaiah, the prophet, and so he's going to have to unroll a good bit of it. He's got one end and he's going to turn and get all the way to where he's going. Now he takes some liberties with the text. There were no chapter and verse markings at the time of Jesus. That comes in the Middle Ages. So he has to know this text really well to be able to get to this point and to find and to begin to read. The Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the people, to bring freedom to the captives, sight to the blind, to bring hope, to pronounce the year of the Lord's favor. What's remarkable is after he rolls this up and hands it back to the attendant, he sits, which is a place of honor again, up usually on the bema, up where the scroll would have been kept, and he addresses the congregation, as I'm privileged to do now. And he says to them, today, right now, in your very midst, this has begun to take place. The very things that Jesus had said in the text, God has anointed me to bring good news to the people, to set the captives free. All of those things. And people listening are listening, wow, okay. God is coming to his people. God is going to be doing something in our midst. And so they continue to listen. And Jesus, in his reaction to them, is emphatic that things are happening right now, not just some other time, but right now. And the people, right in the midst of all of this. Well, they didn't really begin to think much was going to happen because, after all, who was this kid? I mean, we knew this guy when he started, right? We watched him grow up here. Isn't he the son of Joseph after all? So prove it. Show us that things are going to happen here, that we are going to be people receiving words of encouragement and blessing, that our lives are going to be better, that we have something to hope for. After all, we are God's chosen people. We're not blind after all. We don't need to see any better. Do we? Maybe we do. Maybe we do. So the question begins to be asked. I remember my own first preaching. I was invited back in those days, 40-some years ago. We would go home and during a short period of spring break, and I was from the Diocese of Southeast Florida, and that's when you met the bishop and the standing committee and all those clergy that have fun. All that stuff that you get to do, all those things. Well, I was home my first year to go through the hurdles, and you would be assigned to go preach at your parish for theological education offering. That was to raise money for seminaries. So I went in fear and trepidation back to my home parish, and I got in the pulpit and preached. And afterwards, one of the matriarchs of the parish came up to me. She says, "Dennis, after hearing you preach, I can see why the seminary needs so much money." Now, I took it to mean that I did such a good job that she understood why theological education was expensive and they needed money. I was at least hoping that was the bottom line. So Jesus gets assessed here. Yeah, I don't know whether we're going to get anything out of this or not. And then Jesus begins to deal with their skepticisms and doubts. And he says, well, you can say to me, heal yourself. But let me tell you, quoting from the old text, when Elijah was around, there were lots of starving people, but where did he go? To a Sidonian widow during the drought of 3.5 years. And the only person Elisha healed of leprosy was the general of the army that defeated Israel, Naaman. That would be like us seeing God go bless ISIS. We'd feel about as encouraged. And we, the people of God who come on a regular basis, really expect that if God's going to do anything, he's got to start right here. And Jesus said, it's happening right now, in your midst, in the front of you. God is here. But you see, God also loves others. Well, I'll be darned about that. I don't like that one bit. I bet some of you know the story of the prodigal son. The older brother, when he comes home and finds a party going on, and what does he do? You have a party when the reprobate comes home? We don't like it when the undeserving, the unwashed, the unwanted, the outsider comes home. I don't like it one bit. Why should we have blessings and help for those other people over there? Why should they get to, you know, those lazy vagrants, you know, they don't deserve it. As if we do. What is in us that makes us so stingy? What is it that makes us resent others who might get something more than we get? See, the father of the two sons said, you've always been with me. I love you enormously, but I can't not love the one who went away and threw away his life. He was dead, now he's fine. He was lost, he's now found. We had to celebrate. Can we not find that love? Did we not hear that wonderful 13th chapter, 1 Corinthians? God is that love that transforms life, that brings hope, that really does transform every little petty bit of all of us so that we can go out these doors and carry some of the light of Christ to the world. Yesterday was the Feast of Lights, Feast of the Presentation. It is when the Church of England, at least, blesses all the candles to be used all year long. Throughout the church, the symbol of the light, symbol of Epiphany, the light of Christ. And light is not to be hidden away. We tend to hoard it and present it's ours only, just like the people in the synagogue in Nazareth at the time of Jesus. Because you see, God hadn't stopped working then. He didn't stop working now. The news is that we are participants and God is in our midst, and he's saying the very words of hope and consolation and new life that were preached then are still real. And God continues in our midst if we will but open our eyes to see the invitation to follow him. Last Sunday, I got to celebrate and preach at a small church, Holy Family, in Mills River, just near my home, actually. And the opening hymn was When Morning Gilds the Skies, one of my favorite hymns of all time. May Jesus Christ be praised. But the point, sadly, is that we spend so much time worshiping Jesus. That's the first 4 centuries the church made us worship him instead of follow him. What is the invitation Jesus gave over and over and over again? What do we hear in our presiding bishop, Michael Curry, saying? What are we called to be? Disciples who follow Jesus. Yes, let's worship him. Let's honor him. Let's adore him. But let's follow him. And that means to go in the dangerous places, to the margins, to the outskirts, to the people who don't think they're included. They're not welcome. They aren't part. Diana Butler Bass, who's done some wonderful jobs, a theologian, historian, college professor, written a number of books. Her most recent, she describes the decline of Protestantism. She says all denominations in the United States are declining in numbers. And she said Protestantism just is infatuated with looking back to its past, to the glory days of the 50s and 60s when the churches were full, as if God stopped or died or something. What happened is that we lost the vision. We lost the compassionate message that brings hope and life, sight to the blind, set the captives free. The year of the Lord's favor, it's now, not some other time. God didn't stop. We stopped. We got so caught up in building our little fortresses and staying inside, waiting for people to come to us. The Jesus movement is the movement that goes out those doors after Jesus has come to be very present to us and says, share the love with everybody. In this broken, dark, hurting world, there are people longing to hear the good news, longing to hear that they're loved, longing to hear that they are not rejected, that they are good enough, just like the rest of us. Sadly, a lot of us have forgotten that we are so loved. Maybe that's why we're reluctant to tell anybody else, because we're not sure it really does apply to us. Well, I hope you hear that you are loved beyond your wildest imagining. That God holds you in the heart of his very being. And that he invites us then to share that sense of that wondrous love with other people. Back in the years when I was a young priest in this diocese, Robin Johnson was doing transformational work here in Gastonia out of this church. He helped start the hospice program in Gaston County. He brought grace and dignity to the end of life. But it wasn't just to bring grace to death. It's so that people could live, so that families could gather with those who were coming to the close of life to be part of that life in its fullness. You see, and we're invited to keep going, to keep recognizing where Jesus is already out there in the neighborhood, out in the community, changing the world and bringing hope. We're to be part of that. We're to be carriers and bearers of the light and the love of God in Jesus Christ. So I hope and pray that as we're gathered here today, that we come to the table and receive the glory of his presence, and we take it out into the world and spread it with enthusiasm. Invite your neighbors. Welcome the stranger. Tell them everyone is welcome here. There is no one who is not welcome at this place. May God, who has so loved us, send us forth to bear that light to all the world. Amen.